It is widely expected that Jay Hill will be departing BYU, but what are the chances that BYU football and Kalani Sitake will have to replace him and Aaron Roderick? Well, there's some speculation out there that says A-Rod could bolt the farm.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the Carousel Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on the show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for making all of us over at Locked On, America's #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we're going to dig into some of the rumors surrounding Aaron Roderick after we talked about Jay Hill yesterday. What are the chances a second coordinator could be leaving BYU? We'll get into that. Then we're going to talk about what's going on with BYU's backup quarterback position, because at least one of BYU's current backups intends to hit the transfer portal. Then we'll finish up today's show with the latest on BYU football ticket prices. And let's just put it this way. When you add Notre Dame to the schedule and you have 7 home games, prices, as you would expect, go up. All that brought to you today by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, so let's dive right in on today's show. We talked pretty extensively yesterday about the rumors, reports, whatever you want to call it, about Jay Hill very likely headed to Michigan to join Kyle Whittingham's staff with the Wolverines. Well, the other side of that is there has begun to be quite a bit of speculation, and I think the most widely, reported part of it is a quote from Patrick Kinahan, who I work with on a daily basis at the KSL Sports Zone, obviously co-host of DJ and PK, a long-running radio show that I have produced for well over a decade at this point. He said yesterday that he believed that Aaron Roderick could be headed to none other than Utah. Now, this is something that I'll just make a shameless plug for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group, our Everydayer Club. You guys have known about this for multiple days now because I said something similar, that Aaron Roderick was being courted by none other than Morgan Scalley and the Utah Utes. But for PK, because I've known PK for years, he doesn't say stuff very lightly of this variety because he actually is very reticent to put stuff like that out there. But for him to say that Aaron Roderick, in addition to Jay Hill, could be leaving the BYU football program, that leaves you thinking, okay, what in the world is going on here with the BYU football program? Is it suddenly ready to fall completely apart after they've built so much momentum after the last 2 seasons in the Big 12 Conference, going 23-4 overall? Now, I can understand where that fear comes from, because when you have 2 guys who are the architects of respectively BYU's defense in Jay Hill and offensively in Aaron Roderick, having those 2 guys depart for other programs, one of them arch rival of BYU's in Utah in the case of A-Rod, that would absolutely, I think, send some red flags or send a flare up or do whatever it does to worry you as a Cougar fan. But at the same time, let's understand that a lot of this is speculation. A lot of this is us in the media trying to make heads and tails of what's going on out there. If Aaron Roderick is intent on leaving BYU, and as PK did say, it's for reasons other than his performance as BYU's offensive coordinator. I know there are a handful of you out there, more than a handful, I will admit, that think that Aaron Roderick, you're not going to miss him. I can tell you this much. BYU had maybe their second best performance in terms of overall yards available gained. I know it's a really specific metric out there, but I have to say, if you look at what BYU did in that game against Georgia Tech, outside of the fact that they struggled to score when they got inside the 10-yard line, outside of that, BYU's offensive performance, and Joe Wheat chronicled this, obviously doing a great thing, doing what he's doing for Cougs Daily on Sports Illustrated, as well as host of the BYU Hype Train podcast. He mentioned the fact that BYU collected somewhere around 82% of available yards in their season opener against Portland State, which is an absolute just blowout, obviously, as you might recall, to kick off BYU's 2025 season. The second highest in terms of overall yards available gained for BYU this season, oh yes, Georgia Tech in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, just a shade over 80%. That's an elite number. It shows you how well BYU is moving the ball in that game. And had they been able to punch in the ball into the end zone a little more, regularly than they did in that game very easily could have been a one-sided affair in favor of BYU. And it shows, I think, the value that Aaron Roderick offers to the BYU football program. So PK's point was, it's not because Aaron Roderick has not done his job as BYU's offensive coordinator. In fact, he's excelled as BYU's offensive coordinator by any, I think, definable metric out there. He's produced NFL caliber quarterbacks. He had the number 2 overall quarterback in the 2021 NFL draft in Zach Wilson that he obviously helped develop. He obviously did the same thing with Jaron Hall. Jake Retzloff, I think, came of age under Aaron Roderick. We all saw what happened this past season with the Big 12 freshman of the year in Bear Bachmeier, in my opinion. Absolutely showed what Aaron Roderick is capable of as an offensive play caller, and not only just as a quarterback's coach. He's an incredible offensive mind. And if he were to depart BYU, it would be an absolute blow to BYU. Does that mean that they can't recover from it? No, because I'll reiterate a point I made yesterday on the podcast, to those of you who are everydayers, that I believe that BYU, we need to reframe our mindset when it comes to BYU. They are a Power 4 program. They have the requisite funds to go out there and pay competitive salaries in this day and age of college football. This is not having to take a chance on a first-time coordinator. You can go out and hire established coordinators now at BYU. They've done it once before. They can do it again. And let's say Aaron Roderick does intend to leave BYU for more of a lifestyle fit in terms of what he could do at Utah and not do at BYU. Well, you also have guys on the inside, like we much talked about Jay Hill yesterday. There are internal candidates, none other than Fesi Sitake. And Fesi already has offensive coordinating experience. He was the offensive coordinator at Weber State under Jay Hill for a time before joining BYU's staff as first their wide receivers coach, then adding the passing game coordinator title. And oh yes, by the way, the last time BYU made a change of offensive coordinator, who ascended from passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator? Oh yes, Aaron Roderick. Kalani Sitake is no dummy, everybody. I'd be very clear about this. Kalani will have a plan if and when he has to replace these coordinators. And it feels like this on the Aaron Roderick side of things is not as likely to happen as it feels like the Jay Hill thing is. We have national insiders, guys who've got their hooks into every program seemingly across this country, saying that Kyle Whittingham is taking Jay Hill with him to Michigan. The reports have not reached that level for Aaron Roderick, but I believe that if Aaron Roderick does leave BYU, he will not leave BYU up a creek without a paddle. I believe that they will keep, in my opinion, the vast majority of their guys offensively, even guys like a Bear Bachmeier, I think would be more intent and obviously more content to stay in place in Provo at BYU rather than make the change to another program and have to reassert themselves, reestablish themselves, and essentially show once again what they're capable of at another program. There's a good thing going at BYU, and yes, if an offensive coordinator change is in the wings out there, or it's waiting to happen, so be it. But I have full faith that Kalani Sitake, he will make the right decision, at least a good decision, because he is proven to be pretty good about evaluating coaching talent and putting it in positions to succeed. And if it is his cousin and in many cases his half-brother in Fesi Sitake taking over as BYU OC, I think things will just keep rolling on in Provo, albeit with a few tweaks. But I would expect that BYU's offense wouldn't miss much of a beat so long as they keep the vast majority of the guys already in the program who have eligibility and keep them in place, because it really does feel like things would just continue to carry on for BYU, at least from my vantage point as a podcaster and a sports media member covering this saga. Coming up next, though, BYU will have at least one quarterback off of the depth chart, it appears, coming up in the upcoming transfer portal cycle. That's McCae Hillstead, a guy that Bear Bachmeier beat out in training camp. Why is McCae hitting the portal? And more importantly, what does it signal for the BYU football program that a guy like this is leaving the program at this juncture? We'll get into all that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here to get you guys whatever your tickets you want to have, and especially in the case of college football and the college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, being right there in the middle of it all. And if you have intentions on going to any of the bowl games remaining this year, college football playoff games, or the like, well, our friends over Game Time have the ticket options for you guys. That they are giving you the advantage as the fan back is the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The best part about the Game Time app, it's incredibly easy to use. You can go from browsing to buying tickets in literally just minutes, if not sooner than that. You can see exactly what your view from your seat will be right there in the app. My favorite feature, as I say all the time, is seeing college football tickets and the price, including the fees, all right up front when you click on the seat that you're looking at. It makes the whole process as stress-free as it possibly can be. And I want you guys to take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, it's the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And of course, thank you for making Locked On America's #1 sports podcast network. If you are a true everydayer, it is time to go all in. I believe it, at least from my vantage point, as being a member of the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. If you want ad-free audio feeds for your Locked On Cougars content, or really any other podcasts out there in the Locked On Podcast Network, you can do that. You also can get access to our members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. Includes a group chat just for listeners of this show, and it kind of feels more like the social media feeds of yesteryear when it seemed a lot more collegial and a lot more fun, and that's a great way to interact with us here on the show. And if you want to do that, you can go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com to sign up today. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right, so BYU has a quarterback, and it's the latest player to announce they're going to, or at least be reported to be hitting the transfer portal when it opens on January 2nd, and that is backup quarterback McCae Hillstead. Now, Hillstead is a local product, Skyridge High School, grew up in Springville, Utah. He's a Utah Valley boy through and through, and had a prolific prep career at Skyridge High School in Lehigh, then ultimately decided to go to Utah State for a spell, started some games as a freshman at Utah State, and then had some situations that he felt like he was better served to look elsewhere. Ends up landing at BYU and competed, I thought, quite favorably for playing time behind guys like Jake Retzloff, and ultimately losing out in a QB duel that with Bear Bachmeier this past training camp, and relegated to the backup role for BYU. We saw him in certain circumstances, and obviously in key moments, it felt like there could have been maybe some more sightings of McCae Hillstead in this game, but he has decided as a redshirt sophomore with 2 years of eligibility remaining that it is time for him to look elsewhere. And I'll just say this is purely speculation on my part, so you're going to probably hop in my mentions. I know some of you, Mr. Welker and the like, are going to probably, so you're talking about I believe that McCae Hillstead sees the writing on the wall, and that is that whether Bear Bachmeier is in Provo long-term or Ryder Lyons is coming relatively soon, obviously after a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the writing is on the wall for a guy like McCae Hillstead saying, hey, if you want to remain in Provo, you're going to be relegated to backup duty, it appears, for your time in Provo. And I think he is a guy, as many quarterbacks are, is a competitor, and he wants to play ball, and now he's going to look for another opportunity. Does it hurt BYU to lose a guy? Yeah, it does, because it thins out your depth. But at the same time, I've got to believe, and this is personal opinion on the matter, as banged up as Bear Bachmeier was in that Big 12 title game when he could barely move, and in certain circumstances, it felt like in this past game against Georgia Tech, if BYU had a more viable backup option at quarterback, don't you think they would have considered inserting that person into those games? Personal opinion on the matter, but I think it was more a little bit of an indictment on the overall talent base they felt like with the quarterback position, really believing that Bear Bachmeier truly, even as limited as he might have been in that game in Dallas at AT&T Stadium, they still gave him the best chance to win. And I think that says a lot about the state of the BYU quarterback position. Now, I will also add this. McCae Hillstead leaves the program, and in comes Enoch Watson. Now, any of you who know the history of Enoch Watson, he grew up playing in a wing T offense, then transferred. He's a kid from Flagstaff, Arizona, if I recall correctly, then transferred to play for ALA Queen Creek, which was being coached at the time by Ty Detmer, and the offensive coordinator was Max Hall. Played in a much more quarterback-friendly system and really showed what this kid is capable of. I know BYU's coaches are extremely high on the potential of Enoch Watson. And I would expect, and this is my personal feeling on the matter, that come next season, if everything pans out the way they expect it to, the fact that he's already enrolled at BYU, he went through bowl prep, got that kind of, they call it the mini spring ball. I'll have a full spring camp upcoming next spring. And then obviously a full year's roughly worth of work in the weight room and the like. And I think going into next season, I would imagine that Bear Bachmeier is your starting quarterback at BYU, and then the backup is Enoch Watson. And those are two young quarterbacks who are separated by just a year's worth of eligibility, but you still think that the talent base should be higher in that circumstance. It also, with McCae Hillstead exiting the program, could open up a slot for BYU to go out and find another option in the transfer portal to bring in just for depth's sake. Now, it's a lot harder to sell guys when it comes to them wanting to come to a program to be relegated primarily to a backup role, but there are enough guys who hit the portal who may become at the point thinking, okay, maybe you need to latch on somewhere, and would pick BYU. And like I said, simply for depth's sake, they stick around. They also, speaking of BYU, still have the guys like Trayson Bourget, who appears, from everything I've read, he posted about McCae Hillstead saying, hey, I wish you the best. Well, that indicates to me, at least for the time being, that Trayson Bourget plans on sticking around at BYU. And if you know anything about Trayson's background, this is a kid that went to Western Michigan, started games in 2 different seasons for the for the Broncos of Western Michigan, then decided he wanted to go somewhere else, wanted to crack at a higher level, and actually didn't ever really get courted by BYU that much, and then actually enrolled at BYU as a student and walked on with the BYU football program. He wanted so badly to be in Provo, Utah. That's the way he joined the program. So he seems like one of those program guys that, at least from my vantage point, probably is content being that career backup at this juncture. But you can do a lot worse than having guys like that who buy into the whole mantra ethos and the overall just belief in what BYU is about. And you can do a lot with those guys. But I think that the depth chart for BYU, yes, it does take a hit with McCae Hillstead intending the transfer portal. But I also think that it's kind of a circumstantial thing. He wants to play ball. He wants to be a QB1, and it's just not going to happen in Provo, Utah. So I wish McCae nothing but the best. I called his first ever high school start for Skyridge High School when he was just an absolute dynamo, but very, very undersized. And I know that undersized is considered to be a negative thing, but the one thing about McCae was his size never slowed him down when it came to playing football and being a quarterback at the high school level. He showed some things both at Utah State. I also thought at moments during training camp for BYU and he's competing for that starting job, he had his moments, and I wish him the best as he moves forward and wherever he lands. Mr. Hillstead, he's going to have a fan of me because I think that kid's got a lot of talent, and it's still, I think, is yet to be fully tapped into. And we'll see if it pans out, whether it's the G6 or maybe the FCS level at some point. And hopefully he can realize his dream of, once again, being a starting quarterback in college football. All right, so we'll finish up today's show coming up next. If you're planning on going to BYU football games next season, watching like Arizona State, Arizona. Oh, no, some team called Notre Dame. Yes, 7 home games on BYU's home slate next year, and ticket prices reflect that, and they've actually would obviously have gone up as well. Is this going to be an extra burden on Cougar fans? How many of them will be priced out? We'll try and make heads and tails of that next as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, Fridays feel already different in the basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives a new way for you to kick off the weekend with their NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame and limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during that hour always brings something new: boosts, bonuses, and surprises galore. The best part is easy to check on the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. It adds an extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. You can take advantage of that this weekend. The FanDuel app on Friday with the brand new NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's the NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, as they are the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, coming up on the end of the year. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. Going into 2026, we've had a banner 2025, and here's to even better and brighter days ahead on this podcast in 2026. And we'll be endeavoring to bring you the best and latest when it comes to covering all things BYU right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. So thank you once again for your continued love and support. It really does mean the world to me. All right, so if you did not see it yesterday, you probably got an email if you have had BYU season tickets in the past. But BYU sent out what they are planning to do with their tickets for football next season. Now, this is going to be a little different this year because there is 7 home games on the schedule for BYU this year, and that obviously is going to add, an extra game to the docket, thereby raising ticket prices. But ticket prices were already going to go up regardless. So the way I look at it this way is I'm wondering how many Cougar fans are going to be affected by this negatively, where it may, as we've seen with basketball and other sports, price them out. Now, the top tickets are the Prime East Club tickets. Those are the ones, the Y, the BYU thing right there on the east side, the ones that go out to that white tent behind the east stands at halftime and before the game. Those will cost you a cool $4,470 across 7 games for each one of those seats. And they've also put a cap on how many tickets each level of the Cougar Club can buy. Top cap is 12 tickets. There it goes to 8, 6, and 4, I think is the max that a regular fan, if it gets to that point, can buy season tickets for. And the other big change this season with regards to tickets, so up to nearly $4,500 for a seat on the east side. The bottom tier tickets, or what they're calling the economy end zone, are $250. And good friend Nate Slack, obviously doing a lot of good work over at KSL Radio, KSL News Radio, pointed out that this past year it was $175 for the cheapest tickets. The highest price tickets this past season, were $3,350 for those prime East Side seats. So it's a pretty significant jump, over $1,000 at the top end and about $75 on the low end. But I think it's kind of more the sign of the times. Yes, there's an extra home game. And yes, when you have a program like a Notre Dame coming to Provo, Utah, well, you know what? Dollars and cents, capitalism doing its thing. You're going to charge more for those tickets. And the Big 12 slate obviously has got some fun games as well. I think Arizona and Arizona State are coming in. So I think the bigger point to be had here is understand that this is just kind of how the way college sports is going. It's more expensive than ever for BYU to continue to operate the BYU football program the way that I think yours truly and everybody else wants this program to be operated. And the associated costs, plural, of that are passed on, sadly, to the consumers, who are the fans who put butts in seats and go out there and fill out Lavelle Edwards Stadium. Am I expecting BYU to suddenly go from what was SRO, what they call standing room only this past season, to suddenly not having sellouts? No, I fully expect these games next year are going to be packed to the gills. I will just say this. I attended the last game that Notre Dame played in Provo, Utah in 2004. And I remember vividly, my parents had season tickets at the time. I went and sat in the seats that my parents had. And there was a Notre Dame fan. I want to say that they weren't directly adjacent to where my parents' seats were, but they were just down the road. And we got to talking. They had bought season tickets for BYU football simply so they could have the pair of tickets that they sat in that night in that season opener in 2004. I cannot tell you that that's not going to happen again this year with some Notre Dame fans to ensure that they can get out to Provo, Utah and cheer on the Fighting Irish in this game. I would fully expect if that game has the juice, the fur, whatever you want to call it, around it when Notre Dame shows up in Provo, Utah, that might set an attendance record, if not outright just be a bananas type environment. You could have two teams that top 15, top 10 ranked type programs going head to head in Provo, Utah. I'm all for it. But like I said, the associated cost that comes along with that is the fact that you as a Cougar fan are going to be paying more for your seats. Like I said, on the low end, the lowest end, the economy end zone, we're talking the tip top of the north and south end zones, $250. The next step up actually goes to $435. And yeah, if you want to go all the way to the top end, nearly $4,500 a seat for the entire season. Now, the other thing that I'm very intrigued by when it comes to these ticket prices, and more importantly, the layout of how the season is going to look, is a new look for the Rock. Now, that's the BYU student section, and traditionally, they have straddled both the south end of the east stands as well as the, I guess you call it the east side of the south end, where they've kind of gone right around the tunnel there where BYU enters the field of play via their own tunnel, and they have made it pretty a raucous environment. Well, there is change this year where the entire student section is going to be in the south end zone. They have adjusted it where the entire Rock takes about half, if not, actually, no, it's more like kind of 2/3 of the south end zone to have the Rock finally unified in one section of the stadium. Am I fully in favor of it? Yes, but at the same time, the fact that you had students lining both sides of the tunnel where BYU entered the field, that was a really, really unique aspect. And I think it added to the juice that BYU players felt. Will they still bring it? Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. It'd just be more on kind of one side with regular fans on the other side. Speaking of the East stands, but like I said, it's more of a kind of a dollars and cents thing. I think Cougar athletics, BYU athletics realize, hey, those, seats in the East side are pretty prime seating. We can probably make a pretty penny off those for paying customers. So let's do that. And yes, I know that the Rock, they're obviously going to pay in their own right, but I do think that having a unified student section should lend itself, I think, to a new dynamic when it comes to the energy that group brings. But at the same time, it does lose just a little bit when it comes to having, like I said, students on both sides of that tunnel as the Cougars both enter and exit the field. But we'll see how it all plays out. So kind of a new look for BYU athletics in 2026. And yeah, the downside of it all, you're going to be paying more if you're a Cougar fan out there. So save your shekels, save your pennies, and hopefully you will be out there like the rest of Cougar Nation, it feels like, will be endeavoring to do, to be out there when BYU plays Notre Dame and plays the rest of their Big 12 opponents. It's looking like a pretty fun season is in store for us, and the hope is that BYU continues kind of that climb. They're on this meteoric rise in the Big 12 Conference, 11-2 in 2024, 12-2 this past year, the first 12-win season in a quarter century. And quite frankly, I think both the last two seasons are top 5 type seasons all time in BYU football history. What do they have in store for us in 2026? I'm eager to find out, even though it's more than 9 months away. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the show. Hope you guys are all doing fantastic out there, wherever you might be. As always, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. Make sure if you're interested to sign up for the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. It's lockedoncougars.supercast.com. It's lockedoncougars.supercast.com, or check the show notes below for a way to check that out. But as always, make sure you join the show every single day. We like to call you guys our everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Now I want to encourage you guys to make your second listen today. Our friends over at the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin's got you covered literally every single day with the biggest stories across college football. Check that out now wherever you get your podcasts, also available on YouTube. And once again, thank you for your continued support of Locked On Cougars, and come back and be an everydayer tomorrow right here once again on the Locked On Cougars podcast.